Let's jump in with a question we have set up so that I can let some questions pile up. So how can someone at home make the best rosin possible? Let's jump in and kind of give people a high-level overview of making rosin at home.
Sure, yeah. So when you're making rosin at home, it's pretty much the safest way to make any kind of extract. You're not screwing around with butane or anything flammable. Really, it just comes down to the quality of your material. So a lot of people who grow at home are really proud of what they grow. They're looking for genetics that they like. When you take all the time and effort to have your own plants, to tend them, grow them, harvest them, dry, cure, it's a long process from end to end. And there's a lot of parts in the process where, you can make some mistakes. So when you take your product to the finish line and it's great, that's really your best opportunity to press at home. Having good equipment helps, like ours. You can pretty much press on a hair straightener all the way up. So, we're pro solventless, kind of know what people, no matter what people are doing. So having great quality product is definitely the best place to start. And if you're struggling with that, there's a million reviews on.
Yeah, and we've shot a video with your Helix rosin press that you can find on GreenBroz YouTube page. Is it on PurePressure's YouTube page also? I don't remember.
Yeah, yes. We have a pretty good amount of content out there about that. Awesome, super precise. Our lowest cost rosin press all made right here in the United States. So we've got a lot of good videos up on that. And Tim, you and I did some pressing, which was really fun back in my old house, pressing some CBD flower. So you've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, I really enjoyed using that machine too. It was so easy. Like you said on the video, a grandma can do it, which is pretty cool. Now, our first question comes from Kung Fu Vapes. Just now, it says best jar tech methods or temperatures to use to lower viscosities in hash rosin for vape pens.
Yeah, okay. So a lot to unpack with that particular question. The people that we work with that are making solventless vapes, they keep some of their tech that is being used to make these products pretty close to the chest. But what I can share with you is that when you're trying to reduce and get the right viscosity for a rosin cartridge, some strains are going to perform a lot better than others because they have higher terpene content. So strains that are very, very terpene rich, that's going to give you a closer to desired viscosity, and then pressing at a very low temperature for a long time to separate off the terpene so that you just have, a straight terpene amount, a straight terpene layer, and then recombining that in some form or another with your THCA to get that. So really why these businesses, why this information is not publicly available on the internet as a SOP or step-by-step instruction is that, some of these businesses have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in research and development to come up with these cartridges. So they are not about to share their secret techniques to come up with them because these products are so rare. But, with jar tech, and just Tim, for everyone on the show, jar tech, it's kind of a funny way of saying when you're pressing a hash or a Sift rosin that's really nice quality, you press it straight into a jar, and then you have your product in there, and over time it will naturally separate into the terpenes on the top layer. It's almost like oil on water. So you can do hot jar tech where people are doing it anywhere from 80 to about 100 degrees, and it kind of sits in there for up to 2 weeks. Or sometimes people do that cold as well, but that's really all user preference. So it's really about dialing in your separations and trying to get your viscosity right.
We're talking with Eric Vlosky of PurePressure. By the way, I got my PurePressure shirt on that I got from you guys. Killer, right? Yeah, I love it. So if anyone has any rosin questions or anything like that, go ahead and ask them. We've already got 5 questions to get through, and they're kind of piling in as we go. What's your opinion on people deconstructing and reconstructing rosin will be the way people utilize lesser grade rosins?
Yeah, okay. So this is something that applies, pretty much just to Sift, flour, hash rosin. And this is a hot topic in extraction in general, where even though we're not talking about butane right now, there's a very popular extraction technique called CRC, which basically, to sum this all up, we're talking about remediation, which is you have a product that's not your top shelf bud. how do you turn that into something that has the bag appeal that your consumer at the store is going to be excited about? Even though there's a lot of different opinions about, well, darker material can be just as good sometimes. But as a producer who's looking to sell a product, a lighter product is almost always going to command a higher price, kind of, no matter what you're doing. It's just like with flour and, when you're trimming buds in a GreenBroz machine, if it comes out looking like a shaggy monster nug, people aren't going to be as excited about that when it's in the jar. So, the deconstruction of rosin and some of those remediation techniques, I think some of the super purist single source extractors aren't excited about that because they're, so focused on quality that any compromise is seen as betrayal in solventless. And we support that because some of the best dabs I've ever had, some of the best products in the whole world are made with that mentality. But not every grower, not every extraction facility, has the experienced personnel to grow the material that can produce the uncompromised flour and hash and sift and all that kind of stuff. So, I generally think it's a good thing. The more options you have to deconstruct rosins and put them back together into various products, I see it as a good thing just because solventless is generally going to be a higher quality product no matter what you do with it. And now people are doing a lot of stuff like they're taking the alchemists from GreenBroz, doing Sift. And if that comes out a little dark, you can just turn it into edibles. You can turn it into topicals. There's a lot of different product variety that you can do with that so-called, deconstruction or recombination, kind of like what we were just talking about with JarTech and terpenes. Overall, I think it's a good thing, and it gives consumers more products to choose from. So, and it reduces the price point on some of them too, making it a little bit more affordable for people to actually buy some solventless products instead of having to just jump right into a $60 to $100 gram, which is a little too much for some people.
And that's a great point. I think hitting all those markets, because everyone on Instagram will say they only buy the finest premium top shelf cola nugs that have never been touched by a machine trimmer. But then you actually go into a dispensary, and a lot of what leaves that dispensary is not that top shelf product, but people getting those, those eighths or those quarters that are your utility flour that you throw into rolling joints or whatever. But that market is just as big. So thanks to Roots to Rosin for that question. We've got questions coming up from Mendo Herbsman and Grow With Us at Home. First, I'll go to Juan Valencia. What's the worst thing that can happen if I wash with non-chlorinated tap water? I'm guessing they're talking about ice wash.
Yes, talking about bubble hash, ice water hash, very popular thing right now. Between sifting and hash, those are really where most of the best rosins are. All the best rosins are being made with those two methods. The problem with washing with tap water is that tap water typically has fluorine in it, which is, good for your teeth, but maybe not good for your hash. And that testing for tap water and state regulations varies enormously. So where I'm at, I live in the mountains here in Colorado, and our tap water is as good as it is anywhere because we're so close to the source. If you are in, Michigan, if you're
Flint,
in,
Michigan.
you're right. If you're in Flint, your water might be on fire when it comes out of the tap. So, outside of the great variation in the quality of the tap water that you get, usually tap water just has to go a lot further. And while it is often safe to drink, even if it doesn't taste the very best, if you're trying to get the best hash you possibly can, having really cold reverse osmosis water is really the only way to do it. One other quick point that's worth making is that sometimes people will use distilled water to wash hash, but distillation as a process is great if you need to iron your clothes. But distilled water actually concentrates pesticides, which is a little bit strange, so that if there are any residual pesticides in the water that you happen to be working with, the distillation process tends to concentrate them as opposed to get rid of them. So that's why, it costs some money to get an RO system going, get an RO water filter, but it's totally worth it. And you really, really need that kind of water to have the best shot at making the best hash.
Again, we're talking with Eric Vlosky of PurePressure, the director of marketing for them, but you will not find a group of people that know more about rosin, especially solventless rosin pressing. Obviously, the best way to go, the purest way to go, in my opinion. That's why GreenBroz partnered with PurePressure to put their presses through our salespeople, because we want to offer the best. And that's what these guys do. We're not just answering questions here, by the way. You can direct message PurePressure at Go PurePressure is their handle down below. They also do an Instagram live show. You've been doing it every Wednesday, around the same time, right?
10, 11. Yeah, I don't want to take your thunder because
It's okay.
We've got multiple times, but we're talking with a bunch of hash makers, trying to get hash makers on the show. For people that have not tuned into the GreenBroz one, GreenBroz does a great job of bringing on, I think, actually a more diverse cast of characters from all aspects of the, industry in general, where we're a little bit more focused on, not only just extraction, but, talking with hash makers, just because that's kind of our pond that we swim in, whereas GreenBroz operates in a little bit of a wider field. So, right now, a lot of people, even if your state is starting to open up and quarantine's starting to lift, I think the appetite for information and tuning in is very high right now. So, keep an eye out on GreenBroz page, keep an eye on our page. There's a lot of good content that's coming out right now.
That's why I had to shout it out, because with as high of an expert as you guys are, you find people that are doing even more expert things and you bring them on. So it's like the expert exponentially multiplied. It's really cool to watch, and I've enjoyed what you guys are doing, and the knowledge is great. Next question is, grow at home with us. Cool handle. What should I be doing with the material remaining in the bag after pressing hash? We haven't had that question yet.
Yeah, it's a great, this question applies, and I know the way that it's being specifically asked is about ice water hash, but it's a very similar question to sifting as well. And maybe even pressing flour rosin. So I'll try and cover the whole, post-press material question here, because this hopefully will be helpful to other people who are interested in this topic as well. So when you're washing, you're done washing, you've got all this wet, cannabis in your wash liner. If you've washed it 2 or 3 times or more, typically that material is going to be spent, and it's pretty much good at that point to either just drain it and toss it, or, if you have the ability to compost it. A lot of licensed facilities do not have that luxury. It's considered waste, and that they have to follow certain guidelines and protocols in order to dispose of that waste. But we also have a lot of customers and a lot of people out there, especially out in California and Oregon on the West Coast, where, they're doing organic outdoor growing. They're growing in greenhouses. They've got acreage. They've got property. So if you have the ability, we always like to say, compost it if you can. After you've washed it a couple times, though, it's usually pretty spent. But where a lot of people get tripped up with sifting and with ice water hash is that they might only sift it once. They're only going to sift it once. They're only going to wash it once. You want to do that first wash or that first sift and get your primo stuff off the top. Just like your top cola is going to have some of your best trichomes, no matter if you're just selling nugs or if you're making extracts. But then you want to wash it again and then another time. And you want to sift it again and then another time, because you're going to come out with a higher yield and a higher range of products. So your first pass might be your dabbable, high-end, that's your best. But then your second and your third wash, your second and your third sift, that can be more your food grade or some of your leftover material that you can use for topicals and edibles and, all kinds of stuff. So, long story short, once it's spent, do what you can with it. It's organic material, just like any other. But make sure you're actually getting your full yield and getting your full process before throwing it away.
And that is a great point to mention our Alchemist machines that are a dry sift or with dry ice, but dry sift. People out of the gate did one run with them. And like you said, they'd be like, oh, our yield isn't what we wanted out of the whole flour. And it's like, okay, well, now our managers have to show them, well, that second and third run, even though it's not producing the A run, is going to produce that Keef Sift. That's going to go to these other products and extend out the use of that product. So great question. And we haven't had it before, so I'm glad someone brought it up. Let me see if I can pull up the next question here. Grow at Home with Us asked another one. I'll get to that one in just a second. But Mendo Herbsman asked, what makes for better quality Keef pressed rosin or bubble hash rosin?
Yeah. So, this is something that, it's always, every time we do an Instagram live, people are asking about this. Um, it, it really comes down to having a well-grown plant and really, really focusing on the quality of your material in general. And I think a lot of growers, that is absolutely what they do. But I think the best extractors who are doing solventless concentrates, rosin, hash, or otherwise, they're almost, they're like absolutely obsessed with the quality of their material. It's almost their life's mission. So you don't have to, maybe go to that level to come out with a super high quality product. But when it comes to Sift and when it comes to hash, because it's not going to be blasted in butane, there's just a lot less corners that you can cut during the dry, the cure, or if you're just going to freeze it, taking that process. Now, specifically with Sift, it's important that you have a bud structure that isn't too dense, because if your bud structure, you have to have those super rock hard nugs. Well, you've got a lot of cannabinoids and trichomes that are just locked up in the center of that rock that you're not going to effectively get that out with sifting as much. The trichome detachability is much lower. So looking at the bud structure helps a lot before you wash or you sift it. And then just also even getting a jeweler's loupe or just, doing some test runs is one of the biggest things that we tell people is, before you commit pounds and pounds and pounds of some strain or some material to solventless processing, give it a test. Sift a little bit of it, wash a little bit of it, see what it does and see what your yields are, so that you're not disappointed. It's a fundamentally different process than solvent extraction in that if you're using butane or CO2, that's just going to strip whatever's out. You're saturating your material with a chemical, and any cannabinoids are just going to be stripped out no matter what's in there. Whereas with solventless, you're detaching and isolating trichomes. So you've got more factors at play that really go in. So really keeping a close eye, not only on the quality, but then out the other end, is it performing or is it not? And being willing to move on from a strain or use a strain just to sell in a store, just as nugs, or process it another way. You just have to be a little bit savvier with solventless to identify which are your winners.
Again, ask questions down below. We've got more flowing in. Follow-up question from Juan Valencia. How cold should my freezer be for storing fresh flower? And I'm guessing you would need clarification as to what the next step is going to be, but if you could kind of go through a couple scenarios there.
So as we all know, real peer-reviewed information on cannabis is becoming more common, but it's still a relatively rare thing. I mean, you look at the kind of peer-reviewed studies you have in the workout industry. I mean, it's unlimited. It's unlimited. And then in cannabis, it's light. But one of the things that's exciting is that there is a peer-reviewed study that we feel pretty good about that talked about exactly this topic. Feel free to DM us after. We'd be happy to share the link with anyone who's interested. But what they tested was they took dried cannabis and they froze it under different temperatures and different conditions to see which was going to produce the best cannabinoid and terpene retention based on different freezing temperatures. So up until pretty recently, it's been very just kind of bro science of figuring out hey, this is how I feel about it. No, man, this is how I feel about it. The short answer is if you're freezing your flower at any more, and I'd say like below negative 20 degrees, that does not help you. So a lot of businesses out there, they might invest enormous amounts of money in these ultra deep freezers. They cost they really, really are not, it doesn't help retain more cannabinoids. So, your standard freezer is going to be anywhere between, 10 and 20 degrees Fahrenheit. It goes down from there. It just depends on if you have chest freezer. But really, as long as you're nice and frozen and somewhere between negative 20 and probably 15 degrees, you're going to be okay. And that's where they found that over the course of time, the best cannabinoid retention was found. I don't have the exact range off the top of my head, but we'd be happy to share that study. We'll get that back up, and people can take a look at that to get like the perfect temperature range. So long story short, don't need to invest in some ultra freezer. You just need to make sure that when you're freezing it, it's in a nice airtight container, and moisture tight as much as you can, because there's actually a lot of moistures in freezers, and moisture and cannabis, don't always play well.
Okay, going back to Grow at Home with Us, there was 2 follow-ups, so I'm going to go, let's see, there's a couple of follow-ups. So I'm just going to read all 3, and let's try to compartmentalize them. His first was, what should I be doing with the material remaining in the in the bag after pressing hash? And then the follow-up questions were, let's try to get these in order. I use 2-stage filter water with upgraded KDF 1500 dechlorinating filter. Good enough? 40 ppm in, 20 out?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you, unfortunately, on that. We have not really heard from hash makers what the specific part per million of various things in the water would be that would either lead to a great product or a not so great product. If you've got a high quality RO filter, from a reputable company, I'm just gonna, give them the benefit of the doubt that the water coming out of there is going to be perfectly fine for your extraction. Now, we would love and expect to get to a point probably pretty soon where the water going in is being tested, just like you would for having, if you're doing butane extraction, you want to make sure that you're using really high quality, pure butane doesn't have contaminants in it. Same thing for your water. So I don't have a great answer for you. Sounds fine. But we just don't know enough to really say what the ppms need to be to have the best result versus a good result versus a not so good result.
Okay, and I see we have a couple other people that's asked questions. I'll get to those in just a second. We have a couple follow-ups from Grow at Home with Us. Again, he was the one that, or she, I don't know, asked the question about the material remaining in the bag after pressing hash. I was asking about what's in the rosin bag after pressing THCA or remove the hash for food grade. So did you mention that? What would happen after you press the bag that you put into the PurePressure machine?
Yeah, it really depends on kind of what you're pressing. So if you're pressing flour, what we've had a lot of people be successful with is when they're done pressing flour and you've got this kind of spent flour, it almost looks like vape buds, but they're all squished together. People remember enjoying the volcano and coming out with their vape bud. You can take that and put it in a crock pot with some oil and get every last little bit out and get some edible grade oil. You can do the same thing with your Sift bags. Now, when you're doing hash or a really high quality Sift, there's 2 ways that you can extract THCA. You can either press it out of the bag at a very high temperature, or you can keep it in the bag when you're kind of doing a terpene separation. There's 2 ways that people do it. It's really just user preference. So if you're doing a THCA separation and you're keeping your THCA in the bag, that's just about pressing it the right way and then cutting that bag open, and then you kind of got these THCA flakes that can be recombined. So shout out to Simpson Solventless and Eric Simpson, who's kind of the master of THCA molding and doing stuff like that. I would highly encourage you to follow his page and kind of see some of the things that he does. He has really done a good job of also being pretty public about education for THCA, and just showing people what's possible with it. So I definitely recommend following him and checking out some of his posts. He goes into a lot of detail.
Last follow-up with Grow at Home with Us until I get to a couple more from other people. I suspect trichomes detach better when plant medium is super dry upon harvest. What do you think about that?
That's possible. I mean, I think that there's a lot of microbiology happening, not only at the trichome level, but at the plant level itself. And that there's a lot of strong opinions out there in the growing community about doing, the plant needs to be in darkness for 24 to 48 hours before you harvest it, because that concentrates potency, or the plant should be very dry before you cut it down, because that helps the cure and the drying process. My expertise is not growing, so I will, freely admit kind of where the limit of my knowledge is on this topic. I think it's possible, but where we have the most information from talking with hash makers and understanding, because, the trichome detachability is equally important for Sift as it is for ice water hash, has a lot to do with the size and shape of the trichome heads. I think more so than whether or not your plant is a little crispy when you cut it down. Because if you've got a big trichome head sitting on a stalk, it's a lot easier to knock that off. Whereas some trichomes, they almost look like a finger. It's like a little spike. Or you have ones that have really, really small heads and, you know, thick stalks. I mean, you could go on and on. There's so many different shapes and variations that trichomes come in. So some of the super, super winning strains that sift and wash really well, they have like really, really large trichome heads and kind of thinner stalks. But again, some strains just behave differently. Some strains just sift differently. The trichomes detach differently, and we don't really know why in some cases, other than kind of the shape of the trichome head. But I'm sure we'll know a lot more soon.
Again, Eric Vlosky from PurePressure, makers of the best solventless rosin presses in the game, also makers of ice water hash machines that they just came out with that are really cool. Go ahead and hit up GreenBroz if you want any more information on these products, because we sell them. They're our premier partners. We love doing business with them. Mendo Herbsman asks, for denser buds, would you use a shredder before putting the plant material into the rosin press?
Yeah, so we were just talking about how bud structure makes a huge difference if you're pressing rosin, whether it's flour or sifting or whatever it is. Short answer is no. When you grind up your flour before it goes into a bag or before you sift it or before you wash it, what you're really doing is damaging and destroying a lot of the trichome heads. So if you're washing a particularly dense strain or sifting a particularly dense strain, you either need to sift it more quickly or sift it for longer or put a little bit more force on the bud. You know, you want it to break up a little bit in the vessel that you're actually doing your, your first stage extraction in. So for example, if you're using a GreenBroz Alchemist 420 and you just loaded all your buds in there and you know that they're pretty dense, you know, you could try putting, a clean golf ball in there or, some other like, there's ways that you can add some weight that are not going to, create damage or not using dry ice. Because you do want to break them up a little bit, but if you do it in a grinder first, all of the trichomes that have been broken off, now they're in your grinder and they're not on your sift screens, or they're not in your wash bag, or they're not in your flour bag. They're somewhere else, and that's reducing your yield. So we don't really ever recommend anyone pre-grind anything that's just going to reduce your yield and give you a lower quality product. So if you just have a bud that's too dense and it's just not working super well on sift, you just might have to find something else with it, because maybe a third to a quarter of strains out there right now tend to be winners for solventless. And then beyond that, for some of the various factors we've talked about, they just kind of don't play as nicely with the solventless extraction process. So just, kind of being honest with yourself and the material that you have. You can't force certain buds and certain strains to yield great with solventless, at least not yet.
Busy 7891 asks, what is rosin sauce and how is it made? For example, 710 Labs Percy rosin sauce.
Yeah, great question. Also, shout out to 710. Those guys are awesome. They have one of the best, I think, hash channels on Instagram and period, where they just post a ton of really in-depth educational information on a ton of their posts. And they have, some of the best hash in the game. So can't give those guys enough props. I don't know their process. I been in their lab to see them, and they wouldn't share it with us anyway, because again, these are the secrets that make hash companies what they are. But from a general level of how rosin sauce is being made, is pretty much all hash makers are doing it relatively similarly, in that there's a terpene separation process. So you have a lot of really nice quality sift or really nice quality hash. Quality being the number one way to get the terpene separation going. If you have a lower quality product, it just simply doesn't work very well. And you're pressing that material in a fine micron bag at a low temperature for a long time. And what that tends to do is that separates out the terpenes. And then they're recombining that in a jar, in a gram jar, with separated THCA, the crystals, to have, a similar product. I think live resin is really where the sauce and diamonds started. And then solventless found ways to also do that. It wasn't even that recently. I mean, it's almost like a couple of years ago at this point. So it's been around for a while, but it's all about, separating out your different components and then recombining them. in such a way to get a shelf-stable product. It definitely takes some time, some work, and that's why a lot of these companies out there, there's info out there about it, but the people that are doing it the very best, they're not going to tell you their temperatures. They're not going to tell you their times. It took them a long time and a lot of wasted material to figure that out.
Well, what we can tell you is that a lot of them are using PurePressure's Rosin Presses. It's like you said last time we did this interview, Eric, if you're not offering a solventless rosin product, you don't have a high level extraction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just for any extraction company out there, there's always going to be, I would say it seems like the majority of customers in the market in general tend to be looking for a budget product, but you do not have a premium extraction brand if you're not making solventless concentrates in one way or another. I mean, that's just, it's like trying to claim you're a craft brewery, but you're Budweiser. Like, it just doesn't work.
Yeah,
people don't believe it.
To also note for those watching, PurePressure's released a lot of smart technology going with their presses to where you can do programmable batches. You mentioned some of the best people that are producing product with your machines will do tens of thousands of dollars in pressing by just touching a button and walking away, right?
Literally. So, the extraction process is getting to a point where the automation with our equipment is so high end that people are entrusting enormous amounts of, blood and treasure to press their hash on these presses, but doing it very efficiently and not having to man the press every second of the day like some of the more manual options out there demand you to do. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to having a consistent product as a company. That's why if you buy a latte at Starbucks in Seattle, it's the same as you buy it in New York. Really, any consumer product, consistency is the name of the game, no matter what it is. And I think a lot of the really savvy cannabis companies have obviously realized that. So the control that you get with our equipment far surpasses anyone else out there. And what that enables you to have is an extremely consistent product out the other end. So that when somebody comes and buys hash rosin, a Sift rosin from you and your brand, they're expecting that quality. And it's a lot easier to maintain a consistent quality with the control our machines offer.
All right, getting to Dabbington's. I guess before his question, guys, couple more minutes with Eric. We got to let him go, and I don't want to edit too long of a video, let's be honest. Just kidding. Ask questions down below, and we'll get to them before we get out of here. Dabbington's asked, have you seen any type of difference in washing material grown under LEDs versus HPS?
Yeah, good question. And just to give everyone a little bit of insight here who's tuned in that might not be, I think most people are familiar with those terms, but just in case you're not, right now in the grow world, there's three main ways people are doing it. Either you're doing it sun-grown outside or in a greenhouse. You're doing it with high-pressure sodium lights, which have been the industry standard for, I think, decades at this point. And now LED lights are starting to come on as another option. I think this is another one of those areas where someone who has a lot more experience growing than me could probably weigh in and offer their opinion, but it's also one of those things where people in the growing world have extremely strong opinions about whether LEDs offer a better product at the cost of yield than high-pressure sodium. I don't have any strong information points, unfortunately, to tell you that would say that one of our clients is doing all LED and they're seeing these great results, whereas these other people are doing HPS. Like, that's actually a really, really terrific question, and one that we have not gotten any concrete data on. But what I would guess or theorize is that, there does seem to be some data that using LED lights can increase terpene production in certain plants, but sometimes perhaps at the expense of yield. So I would love to see some side-by-sides of the same strain or the same cut being grown under LEDs and HPS, and then washing those two. If you're growing and you're washing, I would you do the test. Tell us what you think, because unfortunately I don't know if there's a big difference. There might be, but with the rate at which things are moving, I'm sure the LED companies, since they're still tend to be looked on as kind of they're definitely still the upstart. Most growers are still very skeptical of LED lights. I think they're looking for any angle that they can get, and I think that they're going to be thinking about extraction a lot more soon, if they're not already. So I would not be surprised if, over the course of the next year, we might actually see something that is a little more definitive there.
What's crazy about that is GreenBroz is one of the lead sponsors of the Grow Off Cannabis Cultivation Competition, where all these growers, like 50 per state, so Colorado, for example, 50 different growers get the same clone, same exact clone, same genetics. They go grow it in whatever style they want to, and then the results go to testing, and the winner of the testing wins the whole thing. But I was just thinking, maybe there's some way where we can press that flower, and then we know all the information in terms of how they grow and what process they used. I wonder if there's something there. We got to talk about that offline. That could be
that you got to, you know, we've done a sponsorship, been to some of their events. I know those people. They're awesome, cool event, really cool competition. They're one of the first people to actually try and bring a competition that's not just, you know, here's your end product, completely focused. You got to take a cut. Who can grow it? There's this whole rah part of it. They need to take it one step further and have it be not just the grow off, but the extract off. Yeah. See, you know, what the final end stage is too. That would be cool.
Yeah, we'll get on between me, you, and Sam, their co-founder. I swear, we'll talk about this because it could be a fun spin-off competition. Okay, last question before we get you out of here. What's the smallest amount of pressure I can apply on a helix press? And I'm guessing so they can get a result. But what kind of data can you share with us on that?
Yeah, so there's a pretty big range, because if you're pressing a really nice sift or a really nice hash, I mean, you could be at under 200 or 300 pounds, you know, at the bag and get a great extraction. Now, if you're pressing flour, you might be up closer to 800, 1,000 or more pounds, you know, actual force application at the bag to get a proper extraction. So if you're pressing flour, you need to press harder. If you're pressing sift or ice water hash, you don't need to press with as much force. Also, the higher quality that you have of your material, the less force you need to get a proper extraction. Quality is a huge factor here, as well as age. So if you're pressing older flour or older hash or older sift, it oxidizes, hardens things up. There's less cannabinoids. You need more heat to extract it as well. So you have all these different factors of age, temperature, time, pressure that play for us. But long story short, if it's high quality, you can get away with very little pressure on a helix. It does the calculations for you for those pound forces. If you're pressing flour, you might need to go a little higher than that, 800 plus.
Well, Eric, man, this has been awesome. Another easy 45. I asked one question from our prep, and that was about it, man. People love these questions. Okay, so everyone who's either just tuning in or has been with us the whole time and wants to refer back to this later, give us a couple days. We'll edit it. We'll put it up on our Vimeo, our YouTube, our GreenBroz.com/media page, so you can check out everything Eric went over, because it was a lot in this 45 minutes. And then we'll also do a transcript and put it out in a blog post, so you'll have it written out for you. You can copy, paste, highlight, all that stuff. But that's going to do it. We will have Eric back. I'm booking you already. We'll coordinate off air. Well, so many questions, and there's still questions flowing in. So that's, what are you going to do, right? But this has been great, man. Much appreciated. Everyone, don't forget to tune in and stay up to date with PurePressure at Go PurePressure to check out their weekly broadcast as well. Tune in over there or tune in over here. It doesn't matter to us. Support either one. Get your knowledge. And tune in for more episodes. Next week, by the way, we're going to have Chris Baca from the clinic. He is their harvesting director who knows everything about how they harvest and create their products. They use a ton of GreenBroz machines. So he'll be joining us and talking about all that, their process, their experience with our machines, multiple award-winning grow out in Colorado using our equipment. So pretty cool stuff. But Eric, thanks, man. This has been great.